I've got this picture to show you, although I'm not sure it's going to work in here now. It worked really well in my office, looking at my computer screen and then looking at a blank wall. You see, you have to look at this picture in the right way for a few seconds, and then you look away at a blank wall. There's not really any blank walls, are you? That's bright. Oh, that's it. If we cut the picture to a blank white, can we do it? Oh, they're ready for it already. Okay, so here we go then. You see there's 4 little black dots in the middle? The 4 little black dots in a vertical row. You've got to stare at those now for 10 seconds. Okay. Blink your eyes. Did it work? Oh. Shall we do it again? Do you like that? So, stare at the dots. Stare at the dots. And now blink. Oh, it works on a black wall too. It's quite clever, isn't it? I wonder if those disciples kind of had to blink a bit when they saw Jesus, said he'd risen from the dead. And he took a little while. Is it really Jesus? But then they saw him for who he was. Maybe it was a little bit like that in their minds. Yeah, quite clever, isn't it? Some people say, well, did Jesus really rise again from the dead? Could it have been possible? What was going on? We've got a few pictures here just to think about that for a moment. I mean, could he really have risen from the dead? Well, let me just get this working. There we go, first picture. What we know is the tomb was empty. There's no doubt about that, else there wouldn't have been any fuss, would there? The fact is, 3 days after Jesus had died, people went to find his body, and it wasn't there. For some reason, it had gone. And, what had happened to it? That was the question, wasn't it? Some people say that he didn't even die on the cross. But, you know, the Romans were pretty good at making sure people did die on a cross. That was their job. And they even stabbed Jesus with a spear in his side to make sure he had died on the cross. It's terrible, isn't it? But I cannot believe he wasn't dead. And even if, for some strange reason, he'd managed to come round again afterwards, trying to move that great big stone away to escape out of the grave would not be really possible. Some people say, well, somebody must have pinched the body. Maybe it was the Romans or the Jewish authorities who decided they'd take it away for safekeeping, just in case the disciples did try to take it. But if they'd done that, well, they would have just produced it later, wouldn't they? When people said, oh, he didn't really rise again, they would have shown the body. Some people say the disciples perhaps stole the body so they could make out that Jesus had risen again from the dead. But that's in fact why the Romans posted a guard there, so that the disciples couldn't do that. But in any case, if the disciples had taken the body, again, why would they have been so keen on speaking for Jesus afterwards? If they knew Jesus hadn't really risen from the dead, would they have given their lives for what they believed, which many of them did? They were willing to die for their belief that they'd really seen Jesus risen from the dead. I can't believe the disciples would have taken the body and did what they did afterwards. When John looked into the tomb, he saw the grave clothes, if you remember. And that's one of the things that helped him to believe that Jesus had risen. And, what a curious thing that is. If somebody had taken the body away, why would they have spent time taking all the grave clothes off it, unwrapping it? That doesn't make any sense. And there was something about the way the grave clothes were arranged when John saw them that made him believe. It was as if the body had just disappeared from within them and they'd just collapsed. That's the kind of way it's described. So the grave clothes were good evidence that Jesus had risen from the dead in some amazing way. Then there were all those people that actually saw him afterwards on at least 10 different occasions. and lots of different people. Mary was the first one to see him just outside the tomb, if you remember. There was those two that we've already been talking about today, those two on that road to Emmaus who saw Jesus. There was all of the disciples in a locked room when Jesus appeared to them all of a sudden. And well, in fact, Thomas was missing, but the second time, Thomas saw him as well, if you remember. Lots of people saw Jesus. In fact, Paul says in the Bible that on one occasion, 500 people at once saw Jesus. And he said, some of them are still alive, you can go and talk to them if you want to. He was so confident that they would agree that had happened. And then there was that last occasion when the disciples, or 7 of them, had breakfast with Jesus on the beach after he'd risen from the dead. They ate together. So they were absolutely convinced that Jesus was alive again. They did see him disappear finally, believing that he went back to heaven. He disappeared from their sight in a cloud, the Bible says. But after that, they just wanted to tell everybody they possibly could that Jesus had died and had risen again from the dead. They believed it. They risked their lives for their faith after that. And that's how the church started. And the church was persecuted in its early days quite strongly, and yet they were so convinced. They knew the truth, that the church grew and grew and spread and spread. And here we are today. There are millions of people who believe Jesus is alive today, all around the world, because they believe, they're convinced in their hearts that they know he's alive, that they can speak to him in their prayers, that it makes a huge difference to them in their lives, that Jesus is alive and that he's really walking through life with them, almost like being on that road to Emmaus. We can't see Jesus, but he promises he's beside us all the way in life by his Spirit. That's my last picture. So that's what we celebrate at Easter, that Jesus died, but he rose again, which proved everything about him, proved he really was the Son of God, or God the Son, proved that through his death he did save us, that we can be forgiven through Jesus and his death for us, and that he is alive today.